Hey, everybody, welcome back to Reason and Theology. Huge news here. The Vatican has finally come out and weighed in on the case of Medjugorje, which is just incredible. We knew in the last week that this was going to be happening. We didn't know how it was going to shake down, but we knew there would be some kind of evaluation about it. In fact, there were hints a few months ago whenever the Vatican came out with some new guidelines on how to assess supernatural phenomenon and apparitions and stuff like that. And we kind of thought, oh, well, you know what? I bet they're going to give a judgment on Medjugorje. And yeah, here we are. So they did that. This has been going on for 4 decades now, a long time. And finally, here's that day. So the Vatican has come out with the document on the Dicastery for the Doctrine of the Faith, weighing in on the question. The Pope has approved the document, and it has issued a nihil obstat in favor of Medjugorje. And a lot of people are divided on the question of whether or not this is an authentic apparition, whether or not it's a scam, if it's fake. A lot of people are saying, hey, there's all kinds of great fruit from it. Others, have a different perspective there. It kind of seems like really people are divided on this more than anything else. In fact, I took a poll right before we went live, just a couple hours before, and I asked people if they hold to Medjugorje as an authentic Marian apparition. And it is, let's see, I got 655 votes. I say, do you believe Medjugorje is an authentic Marian apparition? 51% say yes, 49% say no. I mean, so people are divided on this issue as much as they are divided on questions like who should win in the presidential election, Trump or Harris. Like, it seems like people are split down the middle on this issue. So what we're going to do is we're going to take a look at what the Vatican said, what it didn't say, what the nihil obstat means, what it doesn't mean. We'll take a look at that. We'll also take a look at kind of a brief history of decisions of the church in relation to Medjugorje. And yeah, then I want to also take a look at an article, kind of getting a third party's perspective on it. But before we dive into the document itself, I want to remind you, hit the subscribe button. If you appreciate Reason and Theology, if you've been benefiting from the content, go ahead and do me a favor. Take a moment out to hit the subscribe button, hit the bell for notifications so you know when I go live, and also hit the like button. I would really appreciate that. Now, the document is incredibly long, so I'm not going to be able to read the whole document to you. I'm just going to have to give you the highlights, which is unfortunate because I feel like the Vatican needs to stop being so verbose. We don't need a whole book every time it makes a decision. We don't need that. Can you give us kind of the, a snippet, a rundown, a breakdown in a society where everything is TLDR, too long, didn't read, in a society where we, are very, very busy. A lot of things are calling our attention. Most people are not going to have the time to read through this whole document. So I kind of feel like these long, verbose documents from the Vatican, I just don't find them beneficial. It would be nice to get something more concise. I understand not everything can be concise. I understand that. Maybe give a concise version and come back with a fuller version for people who want to read more. I don't know, just a suggestion. But unfortunately, I can't go through the whole thing because of that. We would just be here forever. But let me just take you straight to the conclusion of the document itself. This is coming from the Vatican website. And so let's see what it actually says. Paragraphs, let's go through 38 to 39. The conclusion. Through the nihil obstat about a spiritual event, the faithful are authorized to give it their adherence in a prudent manner, So you have permission, you have authorization from the church to hold to it. While this does not imply a declaration of the supernatural character of the phenomenon in question. So it's not an evaluation and a judgment on, did the Virgin Mary really appear? Is she really appearing? Is this really happening, or is it a hoax? For better or worse, this is not an evaluation or a judgment on that itself. While this does not imply a declaration of the supernatural character of the phenomenon in question, and recalling that the faithful are not obliged to believe in it. So there's no obligation for you to hold to it. The nihil obstat indicates that the faithful can receive a positive encouragement for their Christian life through this spiritual proposal. It can be beneficial to you. And it authorizes public acts of devotion. So you can have public acts devoted to this specific alleged apparition. The church is authorizing that. Such a determination is possible insofar as many positive fruits have been noted in the midst of a spiritual experience, while negative and dangerous effects have not spread among the people of God. So it's saying there's been a lot of great effects, but not negative effects. Evaluating the abundant and widespread fruits, which are so beautiful and positive, does not imply that the alleged supernatural events are declared authentic. Instead, it only highlights that the Holy Spirit is acting fruitfully for the good of the faithful in the midst of this spiritual phenomenon of Medjugorje. For this reason, all are invited to appreciate and share the pastoral value of this spiritual proposal. Moreover, the positive assessment that most of the messages of Medjugorje are edifying does not imply a declaration that they have a direct supernatural origin. So again, it's not weighing in on the question of its supernatural character. Consequently, when referring to messages from Our Lady, one should always bear in mind that they are alleged messages. So they're still alleged messages. It's not weighing in on that particular character. The elements gathered in this note make it possible to recognize that conditions are present to proceed with determination of a nihil obstat. The bishop will issue the corresponding decree. The special apostolic visitor for the parish of Medjugorje will continue to carry out functions entrusted to him. Should verify that this note is included in an introduction in any publication that collects the message. In light of the clarifications above, he will then discern any future messages or past messages that have not yet been published and should authorize them before any publication. Likewise, he will take such measures as he deems necessary and will guide pastoral discernment in response to new situations that may arise, keeping the dicastery informed. So there's going to be, an ongoing process of discernment here, and he'll be over that. Like I said, this is a really, really long document, but you're getting the gist there. And what you see the document do is it talks about some positive aspects, not only in the fruit of this alleged apparition, but it's also saying, hey, there's some good messages here. There's some things that are in the message that are good. It does note there are some things in the message that are problematic. And it goes over that here in this section, necessary clarifications. And it wants to say effectively, there are some instances where it could be that the alleged visionaries have inserted their own personal opinion into something rather than the Virgin Mary saying certain things. So there are some problematic statements in some of these messages, and it wants to say, we're not approving of everything that has been said. There's some good, there's some bad. We're not saying everything here is from the Virgin Mary. We're not even evaluating that necessarily, but we are saying that some of this stuff appears that it could be human in nature, whereas other things might be supernatural. They don't talk about the fact that one of the visionaries, while in a state of ecstasy, allegedly, somebody tried to poke at her eye and she flinched back, which would indicate she wasn't in a state of ecstasy and that was fake. At least that's how the argument goes. And there is video footage of that online. they don't really grapple with stuff like that. They do try to somewhat distance themselves from the visionaries themselves, alleged visionaries. And they want to call attention to the fruit. They want to call attention to Jesus, and kind of away from the visionaries themselves for one reason or another. It does talk a little bit about some of the problematic statements that may be found. And one of them really fascinated me because it's one that I've been familiar with. There were some statements that almost sound like universalism or some kind of syncretism. And this is incredibly interesting on the heels of some of Pope Francis's recent statements on other religions, which I've reviewed here on this channel in detail, and I've offered some criticisms of them. Now, it's interesting because you kind of have some similar statements allegedly being said by the Virgin Mary, according to the visionaries. And it tackles that issue. Watch what it says, perhaps in a timely way in light of what Pope Francis said. This love, which enables us to bring peace to the world, also implies a love for those who are not Catholic. Indeed, this is not to propose syncretism, so it rejects syncretism, or to say that all religions are equal before God. So it wants to distance itself from any notion of syncretism or all religions being equal before God's sight. Yet still, all people are loved. There is a point better or best understood in the ecumenical and interreligious context of Bosnia and Herzegovina, which has been marked by a terrible war with strong religious components. And then it quotes something from 19th of February, 1984. On earth, you are divided, but you are all my children, Muslims, Orthodox, Catholics. All of you are equal before my son and me. And this caused a lot of people to say, wait, hold on. Sounds like syncretism. Sounds like universalism. Sounds like you're preaching relativism here. You are all my children. This does not mean that all religions are equal before God, but people are. It is not enough, however, to belong to the Catholic Church to be saved. One must respect God's will. To whom little has been given, little has been asked. And that actually was the 20th of May, 1982. Then for February 21st, it says, you are not true Christians if you do not respect your brothers and sisters who belong to other religions. And then on the 19th of February, 1984, however, there's also a reminder of the needs to preserve the Catholic faith at all costs for you and for your children. So it tackles a little bit some of the more problematic statements, and it throws that in there. And I thought I would highlight that just in light of the recent comments that Pope Francis made. I don't think they included this because of what Pope Francis said. I think this was written already before in light of some of these messages allegedly from the Virgin Mary. And it just so happens to coincide with some of the things that Pope Francis has said. So that I thought that was kind of interesting. All right, well, here is a brief article on the matter that kind of gives a breakdown, shows some of the highlights. Vatican approves devotion at Medjugorje while not pronouncing on authenticity of alleged messages. And a highly anticipated report on the alleged decades-long apparition of the Blessed Virgin Mary in Medjugorje, the Vatican's doctrinal office on Thursday endorsed prudent devotion to Mary at the popular pilgrimage site in Bosnia, yet withheld any declaration on whether the alleged visions are supernatural in origin. And because it gave it this nihil obstat, that's the highest level it could give as the Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith. And it did have papal approbation. Very, very clearly, very explicitly, you go towards the end. Supreme Pontiff, Pope Francis, at the audience granted to the undersigned prefect, together with the secretary for the doctrinal section of the Dicastery for the Doctrine of the Faith on August 28th, 2024. Note the date there. Approved this note and ordered its publication, given on September 19th. I wonder why it took so long, though. But anyways, okay, so what you're seeing there is the highest level was given. There were, maybe 6 different notes that were given by Fernandez recently when it comes to evaluating these things. They gave it the highest one. Now, that came as a shocker to me. I expected maybe note number 3 or 4 or something like that, and I know others have as well. And those would maybe point towards not necessarily approving of the devotion itself, but rather recognizing that there are some good fruits. I figured it would do something like that, one of those maybe lesser notes, but they just went full on with the nihil obstat. I thought that was interesting. Now, the article notes September 19th, a note from the dicastery of the doctrine of the faith. I'll put a link to it in the show notes too, by the way, so you can read the whole thing. Signed by Fernandez and approved by the Pope, grants a nihil obstat to the spiritual experience at Medjugorje. The authoritative judgment means that pilgrims may continue to visit and pray at the site, as some 40 million people from around the world have done since the apparitions allegedly began 43 years ago. This thing is older than I am. Goodness. And we're just now getting a judgment on it. One of my questions is, but why does it take so long, 40 years, to evaluate this? I don't know. I don't know. Why did it take 43 years? 6 children who are now middle-aged first reported experiencing visions of the Blessed Virgin Mary, originally on a hilltop near the rural village of Medjugorje on June 24th, 1981. The Vatican's report notes that the remote site, formerly part of Yugoslavia, is now widely perceived as a space of great peace, recollection, and a piety that is sincere, deep, and easily shared. I've had a lot of people say that they've had great experiences there. They've experienced the fruit of it, and it's all been good. Some have even said, I've seen spiritual phenomenon take place there. I mean, I know some of these people who say that. I've never been there, but I know some people who say that. So it's talking about that. While it offers no definitive judgment on the supernatural authenticity of the alleged apparitions, the Vatican's report highlights the abundant good fruits that have come from the alleged apparition. The positive fruits are most evident in the promotion of a healthy practice of a life of faith in accordance with the tradition of the church, the report states. It points to abundant conversions, a frequent return to the sacrament, particularly the Eucharist and reconciliation, many vocations to priestly, religious, and married life, a deepening of the life of faith, a more intense practice of prayer, many reconciliations between spouses, and the renewal of marriage and family life. It should be noted, the report emphasizes that such experiences occur above all in the context of pilgrimages to places associated with the original events rather than in meetings with the visionaries to be present for the alleged apparitions. Fernandez presented the report in a 2-hour-long press conference at the Holy See Press Office September 19th, in a move that was pretty surprising because we've seen Pope Francis be very critical of Medjugorje, in fact, indicating that he doesn't think that this is the Virgin Mary. He said that on a press conference, a press conference on an airplane. I don't remember where he was returning from, but it was in one of those meetings on an airplane. And he kind of made fun of this notion that every day the Virgin Mary shows up at this exact time, like, a telegram or something. And he was kind of mocking that, clearly saying he doesn't think that that's the Virgin Mary. And he was referring to Medjugorje. So this is pretty interesting decision, given that he approved of this nihil obstat. The prelate quoted Ratzinger's 85 statement that emphasized separating the question of supernatural origin from spiritual fruits. So again, they're not making a determination on the supernatural origin. The same Pope Francis, who doesn't appear to think that this is supernatural in nature, still does recognize the fruits from it as evident from this approval. Fernandez pointed out that Ratzinger said, even if modern critical thinking might question some aspects, this doesn't detract from the fact that those pilgrimages were fruitful, useful, important for the life of the Christian people. On this view, he added, Pope Francis said there was no magic wand to determine the authenticity of the phenomenon, but the spiritual pastoral fact cannot be denied. It says a significant portion of the document is a summary of the central points and spirituality of the numerous alleged messages received by the alleged visionaries, identifying Queen of Peace as the most original title in the alleged messages, though Mary most frequently refers to herself as Mother. The predominant themes of those communications, which the Vatican stresses should be referred to as alleged messages, Our calls for conversion, peace, reconciliation, a return to the sacraments, along with a constant call to abandon worldly lifestyle and excessive attachment to worldly goods. One of the prevailing characteristics of the spirituality that emerges from the messages is that of trust in God through a total trust in Mary in order to become instruments of peace in the world, the Vatican document says. It goes on to note, the note quotes from some of the messages to illustrate that in the missives, Our Lady does not place herself at the center, but shows herself to be fully directed toward our union with God. The spirituality of the messages is also one of communion with the Pope and with the whole church. It said, and the spirituality of Medjugorje is overall joyful, celebratory, and includes a call to live the joy of following Christ. During Thursday's press conference, Fernandez quoted from several of the alleged messages he found to be edifying. Most of the message have a beautiful content that can stimulate the faithful to converge and to grow in their encounter with Christ, to be peacemakers in the world, he said. The report also notes that that as in other spiritual experiences and alleged supernatural phenomena, positive and edifying elements are mixed with some other elements that are to be ignored. Listen to that. He's saying, hey, there's some really good stuff here, but there's also some stuff that, you just got to reject. Adding, but this fact should not lead one to spurn the richness and the good of the Medjugorje proposal as a whole. The report draws attention to a number of misleading messages from Mary, particularly when she reprimands or makes threats or when she insists strongly on listening to her messages. This risks creating a dependence and an excessive expectation on the part of the faithful, which could ultimately obscure the central importance of the revealed word, which would be the Bible, right? You don't want this to take the place of the Bible. The note said this becomes even more problematic when the messages give orders about specific dates, places, and practical decisions unlikely to be of supernatural origin. Oh, so while they haven't approved of the supernatural character one way or the other, he does note there are some instances that are unlikely to be supernatural. But he's not saying that of the whole thing. He's just saying that of some of it. Although messages of this type are infrequent in Medjugorje, we can find some of them that are explained solely from the personal desires of the alleged visionaries. So, in other words, he's indicating that in some instances, it's the visionaries who are inserting themselves into the message, not the Virgin Mary. It's reasonable for the faithful using prudence and common sense not to take these details seriously nor to heed them. So in other words, there's some things that the visionaries are saying the Virgin Mary said that you don't need to accept as from the Virgin Mary. The dicastery also said those messages that attribute to Our Lady the expressions my plan or my project also show a certain problematic aspect, and these expressions might create some confusion because in reality, everything that Mary accomplishes is always at the service of the Lord's plan and his divine plan of salvation. But, some people have interpreted, some of these comments about my plan, allegedly from the Virgin Mary. It's like, wait, I thought this is supposed to be God's plan. Why is it your plan? That's what he's addressing there. Another term requiring special attention is the possible misuse of the word mediatrix in reference to Mary in the messages. When the messages say, I am the mediatrix between you and God, and I desire to be the link between you and the Heavenly Father, your mediatrix, they fail to express adequately the fact that, as St. John Paul II said, Mary's mediatory cooperation is subordinate to the mediation of Christ. So sometimes some of this stuff comes across in the wrong way. The DDF said Archbishop Cavalli, special apostolic future publication of any future messages. Dicastery advises people who may visit Medjugorje the pilgrimages should be made to meet the alleged visionaries, to have an encounter with Mary, Queen of Peace, and with her son Jesus Christ through participation in the sacraments. Some of the alleged messages of Mary the Vatican found problematic were those containing explicit and repeated exhortations to the parishioners of the local church, St. James, the Vatican said. So some of the alleged words from the Virgin Mary pertain to various affairs that are taking place at that local parish. And so it's kind of like the Virgin Mary is allegedly inserting herself into the local parish life, which would be somewhat of a replacement of the ordinary organs that are over the functioning of the parish life. That's one of the concerns. Those messages are an understandable expression of the alleged visionaries' intense love for the parish unity, the note states. So that's a really nice way to say the visionaries are claiming that the Virgin Mary is saying these things, but in reality, she very well may not be. And this is rather the opinion being inserted by the visionaries, which is, I think, a very critical thing to say of them, of these alleged visionaries. That's a very critical thing to say of them, because it's effectively saying they're making some of this stuff up in the name of the Virgin Mary. And they're couching it in a nice way. It's because of their intense love for the parish community. But to me, that seems like a very critical thing to say. However, Our Lady's messages cannot replace the ordinary role of the parish priest, the pastoral council, and the synodal work of the community regarding decisions that are the subject of communal discernment through which the parish matures in prudence, fraternal listening, respect for others, and dialogue. As far as the neo-Obstat, in accordance with the new norms on the discernment of alleged supernatural phenomena, the local bishop must consult and receive final approval from the Vatican after investigating and judging alleged apparitions and connected devotions, which is going to be interesting because these are supposed to occur every day. So I wonder how this is going to work every day moving forward. According to the May 17 norm, a neo-Obstat judgment means without expressing any certainty about the supernatural authenticity of the phenomenon itself, many signs of the action of the Holy Spirit are acknowledged in the midst of a given spiritual experience. September 19th notes, the DDF explained that through the neo-Obstat about a spiritual event, the faithful are authorized to give it their adherence in a prudent manner. So you're authorized to give it adherence, but you're of course not required to. You're free to reject it. While this does not imply a declaration of the supernatural character, and recalling that the faithful are not obliged to believe in it, the neo-Obstat indicates that the faithful can receive a positive encouragement for their Christian life through this spiritual proposal, and it authorizes public acts of devotion. So again, keep that in mind. It's not weighing in one way or another on the supernatural character. I've seen, in fact, some people say, one way or the other. And it's like, no, we got to pay attention. Got to be careful here. It's not affirming the supernatural character, also not denying the supernatural character. It's kind of sidestepping that issue. So it continues. Such a determination is possible, it said, insofar as many positive fruits have been noted in the midst of the experience. And I want to show you one other thing. What has the Catholic Church said about Medjugorje timeline? Well, again, this has been going on for 43 years. So obviously, this is just going to be a summary. All right. So after more than 4 decades of an alleged spiritual phenomenon going on, supernatural phenomenon going on, it gives this timeline. Scroll down to it. April 10th, 1991. After local bishops formed 3 different commissions to study the phenomenon at Medjugorje, starting in January 1982, the Bishops' Conference of what was then Yugoslavia rules that on the basis of studies conducted so far, it cannot be affirmed that supernatural apparitions and revelations are occurring. So it wasn't saying there aren't any, but it also was basically saying we can't affirm that there are supernatural apparitions going on. March 23rd, 1996, affirming the indications of the Yugoslavia bishops, the Secretary of the Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith, Archbishop Bertone, says in a response to a letter from a French bishop that official pilgrimages to Medjugorje as a site of authentic Marian apparitions organized at the diocesan or parish level are not permitted. So as a site of authentic Marian apparitions, that was not permitted. March 17th of 2010, at the request of the bishops of Bosnia, Pope Benedict XVI establishes a commission chaired by Cardinal Ruini to investigate the supernatural character of the events in Medjugorje. The commission includes approximately 20 cardinals, bishops, and experts. And it goes on to note, January 17, 2014, after nearly 4 years of investigation into the doctrinal and disciplinary aspects of Medjugorje, the commission formed in 2010 repletes its work and submits a document, the so-called Ruini report, to the then Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith. Pope Francis on June 6, 2015, visits Bosnia but declines to stop at Medjugorje. During the in-flight press conference on the papal plane returning to Rome, Pope says the Vatican's investigation into the apparitions is nearly complete. That's 2015. If it was nearly complete in 2015, why are we here in 2024? Sometime in 2016, it notes, the Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith under Mueller reads and discusses the findings of the Ruini report. The opinions of the congregation members are then sent to Pope Francis. February 11, 2017, Pope Francis appoints a Polish archbishop, papal envoy to Medjugorje, with the aim of acquiring a deeper knowledge of the pastoral situation. A Vatican spokesman clarifies that the archbishop's mandate is pastoral and not doctrinal. 2 months later, after his appointment as a special envoy, Hozier tells members of the press that the site bears many genuine expressions of faith and many vocations are found there. However, he clarifies that the final determination of the apparition's authenticity remains to be seen. In some ways, you could still say that because the Vatican didn't really weigh in on the authenticity of the phenomenon itself, did it? So we've waited 43 years for it to come out with a judgment and kind of sidestep the issue, in some ways at least. May 13, 2017, Pope Francis speaks about the commission formed by Benedict XVI in 2010 of the so-called Ruini report during an in-flight press conference aboard the papal plane. He says he's personally suspicious of the apparitions since they appear to him to turn the Blessed Virgin Mary into a telegraph operator, delivering daily messages. That's what I was referring to earlier. A report in the Vatican Insider on 2017 on May 17th says that the 2010-2014 Commission's Ruini report found a difference between the first 7 alleged apparitions and those that followed. So there was a difference in the character between the first 7 and everything else that came out afterwards. The vote on the first 7 alleged apparitions gave a mostly favorable opinion on the supernaturality of them. The majority of commission members also expressed an opinion that the spiritual fruits of Medjugorje were positive. December 7, 2017, Hozier tells Catholic media outlet Alitia that while the Pope will make a final decision on the authenticity of the alleged visions at Medjugorje, today dioceses and other institutions can organize official pilgrimages. It's no longer a problem. Well, unfortunately, he didn't actually make a decision on the authenticity. So Pope Francis reappoints Hozier in 2018. Tasked with overseeing the pastoral needs of the community, Pope Francis formally authorizes Catholics to organize pilgrimages to Medjugorje May 12th of 2019. And that was in acknowledgement of the abundant fruits from the location. August 14, 2021, Hozier dies in a hospital. Francis names another Vatican diplomat as special apostolic visitator, 27th of November 2021. And that is it as far as the timeline. Then we have today as the update, 2024. So in some ways, the question is still open on the supernatural character of the phenomenon itself. Is it supernatural? Is it natural in origin? Is it a combination of both? Is it that some of the messages are from the Virgin Mary, some are from the alleged seers? Like, is it a mix between the two? They kind of sidestepped it and just evaluated the question of the fruits and whether or not there could be public acts of devotion to it. And it said yes to them and gave it its highest approval, while at the same time being critical of the visionaries and of some of the messages and showing out some of the problems, while also at the same time highlighting some things that it thought were great messages from the alleged vision. And it outlines a ton of them in the document. I'll put a link to it in the show notes, and you can go and read it for yourself at your own leisure. Like I said, it's very long, but this is pretty much the cliff notes, what I just gave you here. This is kind of what you need to know, your TLDR version. So hopefully this was helpful to you. If you thought it was, hit the subscribe button. If you have benefited from Reason and Theology, go ahead and do that for me. And consider supporting the channel at patreon.com/Reason and Theology. Also, I want to hear from you guys. I did that poll. Do you think that this is authentic? But I want to hear from y'all as well. Those of y'all who didn't do the poll, I want to hear from you in the comment section. In the comments, put your thoughts here. Do you think it's a combination of authentic visions of the Virgin Mary mixed in with stuff that's just made up by the visionaries? Do you think the whole thing's made up? Do you think that the whole thing is authentic? All of this is from the Virgin Mary? Let me know what you think. I want to hear from you. I want to get your thoughts. Put that feedback there in the comment section. And again, don't forget to subscribe. All right. See y'all tomorrow. God bless.